Parliament, as I said, has resumed in Canberra. I mean, Senator Jackie Lambie, talk about flaky. Yesterday she's out there saying she's going to back this card that you will have to take. You have to take a drug test to retain it. And if you test positive, what you're going to actually end up doing is having not being able to buy drugs or alcohol. Now, I don't think anyone has an argument with that. She supported it yesterday. Today she says, oh, no, I don't support it. I want a few other things put in place before, including a lot of drug rehab places. I mean, you need to keep your story consistent, don't you? Her Senate colleague, Pauline Hanson's on the line. Senator, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Steve.
Oh, talk about flaky.
Yes, can be, considering when you look at the legislation, how it would help these people. We actually have people contacting my office and who are begging us to actually do something to pass this so that they can actually stop their kids from getting drugs. It is more important to actually do that in the long run, looking at the safety of these kids. When I travel around the country, especially in rural and regional areas, they are just full of drugs, and there's no hope for them whatsoever. The drug pushers go in there, they spend the money there, and it's destroying these communities. And we know it's a known fact in our cities as well. And just off Western Australia, they took what they called $1 billion worth of drugs that are dumped there. Australia is known as a dumping ground because I had time I spent with the federal police and the drugs that they had collected. And in one of their, it's a highly, what can I say, like a big vault, and they had all the drugs in it. It was $5 billion worth of drugs being held there for cases that were coming forward, and then they destroy them, get rid of them. The drugs coming into the country is unbelievable because they can get the high prices for it. And we need to put a stop to this. And if it means the drug testing, I'm all for it.
My point on Friday was if it's a good idea, do it everywhere. The government wants to have a trial in places like Logan in Queensland, which you'd know very well, in Canterbury, Bankstown in Sydney, and in one location in Western Australia. I mean, if it's a good idea, shouldn't we just get on and do it?
You're getting resistance from some of the people, especially the Central Alliance are resisting this. The Greens resist it all the time. Labor Party will not be on board with it. And, of course, Jackie Lambie, I'm all for it. Jackie Lambie, she's so wishy-washy. She jumps from one side to the other. She's probably trying to do deals, and she'll only sell her vote, not looking at the real reason behind this, why we need to do it. Now, people's lives are being destroyed. Not only the people taking the drugs, but the families as well. And they want some answers to it. Now, it should be rolled out, but people are resisting them. And you have the general public that are going to resist this because of people's rights. Well, I'm sorry, if you're actually accepting taxpayers' monies who are giving you a helping hand, you have to be responsible to those taxpayers and show them the fact that you're not wasting their hard-earned taxpayers' dollars on drugs, that you're going to end up being brain stupid or dead, and then we're going to have to pick up the health bill for the rest of your life. So it's about getting people off this, getting them into rehabilitation if they've actually been tested positive. You've got a chance to actually get your act together. The government will take you through a rehab program and get your life back.
So you would support, would you, the idea that if this happens, I mean, Jackie Lambie put this on the table the other day, you wouldn't have a problem with being drug tested in Parliament, I gather?
Oh, God, no. I've got no problem with it whatsoever. You know, I'm so anti-drugs in our society. Look, I went to Tamworth earlier this year. You had the older generation and younger generation having a fantastic time. They didn't have to go and get their pills tested because, you know, we don't need it. We're encouraging drug testing by having pill testing at these big music venues and everything like that. What do people do the rest of the time when they're not at these venues? People have to start taking responsibility for their own actions, and it's called tough love. And I do exactly the same to my kids. You want to be stupid enough to actually take a drug, well, then you be responsible for your own actions. The rest of society shouldn't have to be picking up the pieces.
Correct. Well, Lambie says there's not enough support services. In your experience, are there?
I think there are support services out there. If people are willing to reach out for it, they probably are stretched to the limit, because what I'm understanding is a lot more people are getting on drugs these days. But it has to start in the educational system. You actually have to come across so many people. They've been heavily involved in drugs. They've turned their lives around. They want to get involved in the educational system, go and talk one-on-one with these kids, show them how their life has turned around. Are they allowed to do it? No. And that's where we need to get the kids when they're young. Sorry, my voice.
That's okay. Have a cough. That's fine. I just wanted to talk to you also about, just before we leave the drug issue, do you speak with Jackie Lambie? I mean, if her vote switches back the other way, which is what she's indicating now, this won't get through, would you try and convince her to leave it and support it?
I will have a talk with her. Where Jackie's head is I don't know. Look,
did you get on with her?
I don't have a lot to do with Jackie. I actually spoke to the other day. I tried to put up a notice motion on the floor of Parliament about income splitting, so that we can actually have those people who want to split their income with their partner so they can stay home with the kids and try and hold families together. And I said, well, why didn't you support my bill? It was a tie vote, and their vote, hers and Centre Alliance, would have actually got it over the line. And I said to her, why didn't you vote for it? And she said, I didn't understand what income splitting was. And Centre Alliance, Patrick, said exactly the same to me. And when I explained it to her, she said, I would have voted for that. Well, why didn't you come and ask me? Perhaps
they need to do a bit of homework. What about Richard Di Natale blaming these fires before they're even out on climate change?
Stevie's an absolute idiot. I am sick and tired of hearing the Greens go on the floor of Parliament about climate change, and they're brainwashing the kids in the educational system. They have this way of thinking. The fact is that we've had climate change. We actually tried to get some figures from the years ago, 100 years ago. They don't report the figures of the temperatures that were round, and they were actually hotter years ago. Recording of figures is not correct, and they're using this to push their own agenda, and to actually blame it on climate change is ridiculous.
I mean, we heard that police officer there. The police officer there at a media conference said one of those fires in Queensland was lit by young children.
We know that. We hear it every time where fires are lit by these arsonists, these people out of little kids that actually light these fires. Look, it's so dry up home my way, and of course the climate that we live in, but also the explosion with eucalypt trees. If they explode, and the fire just rages more. But I blame the government, state governments, who have not cleaned up our national forests. They do not allow people to clear the trees around their homes within a certain distance. You've got the mulga that's been cut down out at Western Queensland, and then they say once you cut it down to feed the cattle, you can't rake it up. So you've got all this dead wood on the ground. So when a fire goes through, that adds more fuel to it. Then it actually stops the grass from growing through. Then when we have floods, it actually washes all the loose soil down because the grass hasn't been able to grow. It has been bad management of our governments, and Native Vegetation Management Act in Queensland is just ridiculous, shutting down our lands and keeping it clean. This is because of governments, and this has been pushed by the Greenies for so long, and people keep voting for them.
Appreciate your time. Good luck in Parliament this week. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.
Senator Pauline Hanson, 131873 is our number. Bushfires, drug testing on welfare cards. Your calls, and Rita Panahi next.